we're sitting at around 40 people. So guys, I'm no welcome and thank you all for joining the South African Oracle user group training session, plugging into Oracle Database Multitenant architecture. So our focus this year as the user group is that we're going to change our sessions more to training sessions instead of the normal sales pitch. So we're moving more to training sessions, and we're inviting experts in the field to come and give us 1 hour of their time to train the South African community. So guys, that's all from me. I just want to like to let you know that we in Cape Town, we're going to have a mini South African Oracle user group day in Cape Town, and that's going to be in on the 11th or the 12th of June. We're just busy finalizing our preparations. So to those in Cape Town, please do have a look out for the invite and do join us. That's all from me. I would just like to introduce our speaker. He's extremely well known in the Oracle industry. Ian, he's currently an Oracle architect at Oracle South Africa. And extremely respected in the Oracle field. But that's all from me. Thank you for joining. If you have any questions, please put it into the chat, and Ian will answer in the last 10 minutes of today's call, which is the Q&A. Ian, over to you, and thank you very much.
Thank you, Ahmed, and thank you everybody for your patience once again. My sincerest apologies. I got my time zones mixed up. But yeah, welcome to the session. I think just cutting on to what Ahmed was saying, I was trying to put the session together in such a way that it wasn't going to be a sales pitch. Forgive me if there is any sales pitches that does come across, but hopefully there'll be more typing than PowerPoint. So I'm just going to turn my video off just to make sure that there's enough bandwidth going through. And let's open up my share. I'm hoping you can all see my screen now.
Yes, we can see your screen.
Okay, cool. So the customary safe harbor statement, don't hold me to any accidental slip-ups if I mention anything about new features or timeframes, about products or releases, anything along those sorts of lines. And in terms of the agenda, like I said, we sort of want to keep it less sales pitch, more action, more training. So it's going to be really simple, right? We'll be looking at the what, we'll be looking at the why, we'll be looking at the how. Post that, there'll be a quick overview of some nuances that I've sort of come across while working in the multi-tenant / pluggable database space, and we can wrap up with the Q&A at the end. But please do feel free if there are any questions that you do have during the course of the session, just interrupt me and we can tackle that then and there. Also, just let me put forward a disclaimer that it's not going to be an exhaustive overview of what multi-tenant is all about. I think that's like a 2 or 3 day course on its own. So I've sort of cherry-picked a couple of items and things that I think are interesting and very useful to the DBAs, the DBA community, and hopefully it'll make your life easier. So if we're looking at what multi-tenancy is, right, if we just do a quick definition, in the multi-tenant architecture, we've got multiple instances of an application that operate in a shared environment. And the architecture is able to work because each tenant is integrated physically, but logically separated. Multi-tenancy apps can share the same users, display rules, but those users can also customize those to some extent. And this slide elaborates on concepts which by now I hope you've all heard of or have become somewhat familiar with. Of course, I'm referring to CDBs or container databases and PDBs or pluggable databases. So simply put, a container is a structure that maintains pluggable databases. Each pluggable is isolated from its neighbors, and the container has access to all of the metadata of the pluggables, but not direct access to the data held within each pluggable. So that's the what. Now we need to ask the why. So, well, multi-tenancy offers several benefits similar to those that are inherent when you adopt a consolidation approach in your environment. There's just a lot more that goes along with that. Multiple pluggable databases can be supported for separate applications within the same container database. It offers portability and quicker provisioning of environments. Administrative overheads can be significantly reduced since you can perform several operations either at the container level, or you can have more granular control if you need to operate at a pluggable level if that's required. And finally, in a world where it seems most organizations are moving to cloud, you can make maximum use of infrastructure resources, especially in the cloud space where you pay for it per hour, per minute, or per second. Was there a question? Okay. So in that space where you're sort of more cognizant of your infrastructure spend, this is a good way for you to be able to maximize that by hosting all of your database environments with a multi-tenancy approach. And this sort of just circles back to the point around managing many as one. Okay, there are large estates out there where it's a constant battle to stay abreast with the latest security updates, let alone the latest database versions. I mean, the April 2021 release updates were made available about 2 weeks ago. So that's the next patching cycle that's come around, and it's difficult to keep up to date. So as mentioned, Oracle multi-tenancy facilitates rapid cloning and provisioning. We've touched on the manage many as one principle. With several companies also moving to adopt agile methodologies, you may or may not be aware that there are actually database APIs available for empowering test and development teams, incorporating things like PDB refreshes, which can be done into their CICD pipelines, and that is done using REST. Security can be significantly improved, and this is a really nice example because we're sort of eating our own dog food, if you will, because our autonomous database offering is a perfect example of how that can be implemented, and I've got a little demo on that using lockdown profiles. And then, of course, this integration with both RAC and DataGuard to ensure that multi-tenant provides the same standards from a HA perspective. But now you're thinking that this is Oracle we're talking about, and are you actually in the right session? So you're imagining that all the sales guys, all sales girls are gleefully rubbing their hands together, anticipating a deal. Well, what if I told you that this was for free? And it might sound too good to be true. You might sort of want to be getting your best digs out so you can go and stretch your stuff with appropriate social distancing in place, of course. But let's just put a disclaimer out there before you get your dancing shoes on that as with many things in tech, there are some footnotes to be aware of, and I'll touch on those shortly. Okay, but my strange and quirky sense of humor aside, the deprecation of the non-CDB architecture was actually announced with 12.102 way back in 2013, believe it or not. So the long-term strategy has been known for some time, especially the point that's sort of encapsulated in the red block about being de-supported in a release after Oracle Database 19c. And so, my friends, the time has come, it's eventually come to pass that as of Oracle Database 21c, you will no longer be able to create a non-CDB database, and it is officially de-supported as from the next release. And then just to reiterate the positioning of the current release model, which I hope you're all familiar with by now, Oracle Database 19c is the current long-term release with Premier support up until April 2024. and extended support available for an additional 3 years after that. Each interim release is dubbed an innovation release, and that started with 18C. It continues with 21C, and each of those innovation releases will have support for 2 years, but no extended support after that. So with all said and done, I sincerely hope that your current upgrade strategy puts you on the path to 19C. And of course, this screenshot that I've got here is an extract from Mars Note 742060. And I have to thank, we've got some really good product managers, guys by the name of Daniel Overby Hansen, Mike Dietrich. I've sort of come to know some of these Mars notes by heart. And then just remember the with some restrictions part of the slide. Okay, so the big one is that customers will be able to create up to 3 user-created or user-defined PDBs without requiring the multi-tenant license. And the second big one is that that only applies to Oracle Database 19C or higher. So in addition to being the long-term release version, it is another sort of advantage to your estate to actually plan going up to 19C instead of either 12.2 or 18. Obviously, in the real world scenario, we can understand that application certifications may not allow for that, but please do endeavor to go to 19C where possible. And if you're not aware of this little app, I'd encourage you to go and have a look at it. And this just provides validation of the previous slide, but it's useful for wanting to know features or functionalities that are included in the standard database engine, or if it's part of an option. Okay, as I mentioned, this is not going to be too much of a deep dive on the actual multi-tenant architecture. And I'm hoping that you have a basic understanding thereof. A few things that I will touch on, though, is the fact that the SGA and the background processes are shared by all of the PDBs in a CDB. This architecture facilitates role separation at the CDB level, role separation at the PDB level, or allows granular control at the CDB level. I think I might get my tongue tied a little bit during this session, so please bear with me. And I'm sure you're all familiar with the user underscore, all underscore, and DBA underscore views. Okay, user underscore containing all of the objects owned by that user, all underscore, all of the objects accessible by that user, and DBA underscore all of the objects essentially. So now there are corresponding CDB underscore views. And those are obviously accessible from the container or from the CDB root. And the metadata is available at that level, even though the actual data is not. And then just one other thing to mention along those lines is that you also have the concept of common and local users. Common users exist in the container as well as in one or more PDBs, whereas a local user exists exclusively inside a PDB. Also, backup and recovery operations can occur at both the CDB and PDB level. So you could either do a backup of the container and backup all of the PDBs associated with that. You could backup an individual PDB. These days, you can also flashback an individual PDB without affecting all of the other surrounding PDBs or the CDB itself. So while I had hoped to do some demos on some of the following topics, unfortunately, I just ran out of time and we'll have to rain check that for another session. That said, one of the nice things in later versions of the Oracle database is the fact that you can do a hot clone of a PDB. Right? So previously you needed to close the PDB and open it in read-only. Now that's no longer required and the clone operation occurs online. Once you have a gold PDB image, developers can then instantiate snapshot clones directly from this image. And these are based on copy on write technology, so they are highly storage efficient and can be rapidly provisioned. Next up, you can actually configure refreshable PDBs, which extend the hot clone functionality. And this is especially useful for larger systems where the initial build can take some time. The advantage is that once the clone is built, it can just be incrementally refreshed thereafter, almost like a materialized view, because much like a materialized view, the clone can be refreshed manually or on a predefined schedule. And in the quest for 5 nines, there is a high availability requirement to be able to relocate a PDB without taking an outage. And this is possible with online PDB relocation. So under the covers, what actually happens is that we create a refreshable clone, top it up with the latest changes, and transparently switch connections. When that's complete, the original PDB is then dropped. So I know all of that sounds like lots of wishy-washy fluff, but please go and have a look at this playlist. We'll obviously be sharing the deck once the session is wrapped up, and all of the links you'll be able to click through and go check it out. There's a nice playlist on YouTube that the product manager for multi-tenancy, a guy by the name of Patrick Wheeler, has put together. And these videos range, the individual videos range from anywhere between 3 minutes to just under 10 minutes, and provide some validation of some of the concepts that I've mentioned over the past few slides. Okay, so I think this is going to be the crux of the matter for most people, right? Migrating a non-CDB to BDB. Because beyond 19C, it's something that you are going to have to do. So you may as well start planning to do it, especially as part of your upgrade cycle. The question is, how do you do it? Needless to say, I think the first question to do is ask what version of the database are you on, because this will have a bearing on your upgrade path. Hopefully you are on at least 12.102, though in reality there may still be people out there on 11.204, 11.203, hopefully nothing older than that. But if you are anything older than 11.204, so 11.203 and below, you'll probably need an intermediate jump before you can get to 19C. And then as a result, the version of the database influences the chosen methodology. And I mean, I'm a relatively old school DBA, and I know every DBA will have their preferences. Are you the kind of DBA that prefers to upgrade using the command line and the catctl PL script? That's fine, you can do that, and then post that convert your non-CDB into a PDB. Alternatively, you can do exactly the same thing, except you can use DBUA, the Database Upgrade Assistant. Or first prize is you should use Auto Upgrade, which I'm hoping to kick off, and hopefully it'll finish by the end of the session, which will give you the option to actually perform the upgrade and the conversion in one fell swoop. So just one important thing to mention is that each of these 3 prerequisites have a requirement that the CDB already exists prior to the conversion of your non-CDB to a PDB. And it stands to reason, right? Because you need to plug your old database into a container. So just bear that in mind when you are doing your upgrade. You're going to have your existing database. You're going to have to create a container database that sits alongside that. And then as part of the process, you will convert your non-CDB into a pluggable database that goes into the CDB. And that's just a nice little graphic of what auto upgrade can do. And as always, use the latest version of the auto upgrade tool. I think there was a new one that was released within the past week. So head over onto that Moz note, go and download the auto upgrade tool. If you haven't started using it, I would highly encourage you to do that. And we'll be giving you a bit of a taste of that during the session. Okay, so Bearing in mind that I've started a little late, I apologize for that. Let's get into the actual workings of things. And okay, my sessions have timed out. I just want to reconnect here. So I've got two environments that I've set up in OCI. This is the summary report. Where's it gone? Okay, so I'm just going to have a look at the output of this file quickly. So this was what I did this morning. I was actually just sort of restarting this. As part of auto upgrade, what you can do is you can actually obviously do an analysis of your database prior to the upgrade and the database that you are going to, right? Just to make sure that all the checks and balances are in place. We can see that this is successful. Before we head into that quickly, I just want to also give you an indication of what's on this machine. So I had grand plans to do a lot more than I'll actually be doing today. But like I said, we'll have to rain check and do that at some other time. But essentially what I've got is I've got a 19C container database with release update 10. And then I've got a 12.1 non-CDB database that I've actually created manually with a very simple and straightforward data dictionary. So hopefully that upgrade completes by the end of the session. And the intention is to upgrade that with auto upgrade and then plug that into the CDB that we have over there. So if I just have a look at the auto upgrade config file, right? So you can see the source home is 12.102, the target home is 19C. We have to specify the SID, which we are upgrading. The target version is 19. The target CDB is the name that we've pointed out over there. And then that will be the name of the new PDB once it's been plugged in. Okay. And I've included this option here, though it's not entirely necessary, but this will require double the storage capacity as part of the upgrade, but it gives you a bit of a rollback strategy in the event that for some other reason something fails during the process, remembering that auto upgrade is restartable. So you could potentially fix whatever the issue was that occurred during the upgrade and then resume the upgrade. But for those that are paranoid out there, I think I've lost my cowboy hat many moons ago. And I like to have a little bit of insurance, just bearing in mind though that if you do use that option, you are going to need twice the capacity. So it might not be viable for those systems that are in the terabyte ranges, right? Okay, so let's kick this off and then I'll continue with some of the other items. Let's do that one. Okay, so we'll come back to auto upgrade in a second. Let's just go in here. So what I've got is I've got a normal virtual machine that I've gone and installed Oracle REST data services on. So that's a simple, straightforward little VM that I've got running. And then in terms of the databases, sorry, wrong place. There we go. Okay, so I've got this bare metal machine that I've spun up. Don't worry about those failed warnings. But these essentially sort of reference the instances that you've seen previously, right? So I've got 8 cores assigned to this environment. So hopefully auto upgrade will be able to make maximum use of that, knowing that some operations unfortunately do have to happen in serial, but essentially that's the scope of the environment that we've got today. We've got one ORDS machine that is completely separate from the actual database server, and then all of the databases on the database server itself. So what I want to start off doing is, if we just go back to, I think I might have double pasted there. Yeah. Okay, so the upgrade is running. If we just go back to the machine itself. Okay, so my environment, I've already set my profile accordingly so that when I execute my little alias here, I go straight into the target CDB. In terms of navigating around CDBs, typically what you would do is you would hit the show PDBs button, show PDBs command, apologies, to get a list of all of the pluggables within that container. What's important to note is that if you do a show con name, you will see the name of the container that you are currently connected to, or you can also do show con ID, which is legacy. It was one of the first commands that came out when this was announced in 12.102. The ID is normally not as meaningful as the actual name itself. So you would typically, just as a validation mechanism, issue the show con name command just to get a sense check of where you actually are. Right. So in terms of moving between containers or pluggables, it's really just a question of executing the alter session command, and you would set your container accordingly. Okay, so if I do a show con name now, we can see that I am in the my PDB-06 container. So the first thing that I just want to touch base on in terms of, and I'm sort of skipping ahead into some of the nuances as well, but it sort of lends to the practicality of it. So most DBAs will be used to connecting via the shell, via the operating system, and then doing your commands from there, right? So whether or not you're the SRVCTL type of DBA, if you've got great infrastructure or Oracle Restart installed, or you still do things via SQL+, especially if you're doing things via SQL+, I think it's important that there's one important distinction that you need to be aware of. So this command still works. The only thing is, when you are connected to a pluggable database, it is syntactically the same as this command. My PDB-06 close. Okay, so I can't do this from inside the PDB at the moment because it's already closed, but that's syntactically what it's the equivalent of. What you need to be careful of is, if you are connected to the CDB root, this has a different scope, because then it reverts to a traditional shutdown command, and it actually shuts down the instance and all of the PDBs along with that. So it's going to be one of those things that as you move forward into using multi-tenant, you just need to be a lot more aware in terms of which container you are currently located in. Right. So if I go and say startup now, this actually doesn't do any starting of an instance. I'm really just reopening the pluggable database. So I'm just going back to my root. So if I say alter pluggable database, it's a bit cold in Cape Town, so my fingers are freezing this morning. Okay, so we can see it's got pluggable database altered. It's syntactically the same as that. Right? So if we go show PDBs, we'll see that this now is a status of mounted. Let's just to PDB-05. and do the same thing. Okay, so we'll see that both PDB 5 and 6 are mounted. So takeaway from this is be careful about startup and shutdown. You need to be cognizant in terms of the container that you're currently connected into, because that has bearing on the scope of what you are affecting. Okay, there is another little item for those of you that are used to writing shell scripts, etc., etc. Let's just show you the alias that I've got set up over here. Right, so it's a very straightforward alias, SQL plus /assist_DBA. I'm sure all of the DBAs on the call, you guys are all familiar with that. It's sort of your bread and butter day by day. And let me actually just issue that without my little formatting. Okay. By default, what this does is it takes you into the CDB root. Okay. There is a modification to that. Well, not a modification. There is an enhancement that came out in later releases of the database, where you can export an additional environment variable called Oracle PDB SID. And if we set that to my PDB let's use 03, and then we run this again. If we do a show con name, we are now in my PDB 03. So that's quite useful. However, if this is something that's completely false, there is no error that gets thrown. So you are still allowed to log in. If anybody has any guesses in terms of what you are connected to now, you are connected to the root, okay, by default. So there isn't any mechanism to catch any typos or anything along those sorts of lines. So use this with caution is the message that I'm trying to send to you. If you try and do a set container, okay, that at least gives you some sort of indication that, hey, I'm not really sure what you're talking about here. This thing doesn't exist. Whereas setting the Oracle PDB SID value to some variable and then using that to connect to the database, just please be cautious about that. It is very useful, but with great power comes great responsibility, right? Okay, so that's number one. And number two, I'm just busy working between two machines, so if you just bear with me for 1 second. Okay, what I'm going to head on to now is ORDs and the CICD pipelines that are available. So on the machine where I've got ORDs configured, there is no database on this machine. Okay, we can see by the host name reference here at the top, it's a completely different host name to the database server. If we want confirmation of that, we can go over here to our OCR console. This has got a public IP address that ends in .151. And this one ends in .172. Right, so completely separate machines. There is no relationship between the two whatsoever. I just here. Okay, what I can do is with the curl command. Okay, and I'm taking a few liberties here because obviously ORDs has been configured. There's some work that has gone into the mechanism to actually set that up so that it is ready to enable the database APIs. But I'll include links to all of the documentation in order to do that. But we can effectively use the curl command to issue a post to the container database, and that will actually then either do a clone of an existing PDB, we can do a drop of a PDB, we can create a PDB from scratch. So I think let's do the create portion first. I'll just show you what this JSON file looks like. Okay, so it's a very straightforward mechanism. We're basically just saying we want to create a PDB. That's the name of the PDB, the admin and the admin user's password. And then just setting a couple of other limitations. This is important from an OCI point of view, especially because any database that you create via the console on OCI uses transparent data encryption by default out of the box. That is provided to all databases, all PaaS database systems for free. So this is something that's important because every pluggable that gets created inside the container also needs to have the encryption enabled. And let's just copy out this one over here. So before I do a paste of that command, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to do a tail of the alert log. Okay. And then paste that in there. Okay, so we can see that there's some work that's been happening over here. Pluggable database my_ords PDB has been created. Wallet's been configured correctly. And this is the output that you get from the curl command. Okay, just basically essentially letting you know that everything's completed successfully. If we go back into SQL Plus here and we do a show PDBs, we can see that I now have a my_ords PDB, which I did not have before. Let's just go back and confirm that. Okay, there was no my_ords PDB before. And this is especially useful for those companies that are adopting the agile type of approach, right? So you can empower your development teams to actually use functionality like the online PDB cloning, the refresh of a PDB clone. So if they are unhappy with the state of an environment, obviously there's a little bit of groundwork that needs to be done initially upfront. But once you've sort of established the repeatable actions that are required by the development team, you can essentially set this up so that they are then able to initiate some sort of self-service using API calls. Okay, what I also just want to do is I want to do the clone. But before I do the clone, I just want to connect to this my_ords PDB container. Okay, and I'm going to break all of the rules here because I am a little bit behind, so I do apologize once again, but I'm going to create a table in the system schema. And then let's just grow that up a little bit. Okay, just under 300,000 rows. Where's my clone command? Is that one? Let's just make doubly sure that the clone command is going to clone the right environment. Okay, so the method here is going to be clone. That's going to be the name of the PDB that I'm cloning. And there's a slight difference in terms of the URL path that is used for the clone. So there is a reference diagram or a reference architecture for all of these APIs, right? But when I'm doing the clone over here, you'll see that I'm actually specifying the name of the PDB that I'm intending to clone. So as you become more familiar with all of the paths for all of these actions, it really just does become a lot easier. Okay, so the clone's completed, it's been created. What's happened here? Problem with live demos, eh? Okay, I've got my auth PDB and my clone PDB. So I should have a table in the my clone PDB under the system schema called my objects. It should have just under 300,000 rows. And that's executed twice, but we can see that that operation is also completed successfully. Okay, so very useful feature to make use of. The database APIs that you actually call and initiate with the use of Oracle REST data services. And again, the product management team have actually done a really good job in terms of putting content out there to support this. So if you are familiar with guys like Jeff Smith and Chris Rice, those guys put out a lot of useful content. I've effectively just scavenged some of their stuff as part of this demonstration today. Okay, and then the last thing that I want to do is just talk very quickly about security profiles or lockdown profiles. And this is also something that is being implemented as part of the autonomous database offering. So if anybody's used the always free tier with autonomous database, you'll know that there are certain actions that you cannot perform, and you have a size limit of 20 gigs. So all of these features and capabilities that I'm actually sort of indicating to you guys, it's available to you as well. We've sort of just implemented that in autonomous out of the box. So this is where you get your limits on the PDBs. If you sort of don't want your developers to sort of run away with all of the capacity on your machine, you can actually restrict them or throttle them to that. But going further, one step, you can actually ensure that they don't go too haywire by making use of lockdown profiles. So if we have a look at the demo that I've got set up here. Okay, I just need to clean up on my other machine. I'm cognizant of time. If there are any questions, by all means, please feel free to throw them out there now.
We put them on the chat, Ian.
Thank you, Oba King. Okay, I just needed to do a bit of a cleanup. Right. So let's just make sure we are connected, because I did set that that parameter earlier. I'm in the root. Okay, so just confirming once again, I'm in CDB root. I'm now creating a lockdown profile with a particular name. And then you start assigning what it is that you want to restrict, right? So here I'm disabling the alter system command. But what I am doing is, and this works sort of top down. So for everybody, I'm disabling the alter system statement, the alter system statement. And then for common users, I am enabling that facility. Okay. And because I haven't specified the users clause in the second section, this means that everybody, either a common user or a local user, will be able to use the alter system kill session command, okay, for that clause. And this obviously for the likes of those guys that have used Toad or Oracle SQL Developer, I think chances are often that developers have runaway queries that they need to kill. So you want to be able to allow them to do that for themselves. You can go one step further and say, well, I also want to disable alter session, but I will at least allow the common users to still make those sorts of changes. Going further, you can say, well, I want my local users, so this is all of the users inside the PDB. I want them to not be able to create database links. And you can also disable options. So if you are not licensed for the partitioning option, as an example, you can actually, as part of the lockdown profile, you can go and disable that to make sure that developers don't accidentally create partition tables. And then finally, you can go and have a review of what you've implemented for the specific profile. You have an indication of what the scope is. Okay, so we can see here it's for all, some is for common, some is for local. And let's go and do a test drive of this now to see how it actually works. Oh, so this is what I was still busy working on when I overran the session start. So let's just, okay, I didn't finish all of this up. I do apologize. The intention here was to actually show that when you connect as a local user, you won't be able to create a database link. You are not able to do a simple alter session, set your NLS date format to something else, and that you aren't able to create a partition table, right? So this last part obviously does work because I've connected to the CDB as the sys user. But let's actually just manually run some of this so that I can see if we can get this through to you. Okay, let's just have a look at which PDBs we have. PDB 5 is mounted, that's why. Okay, so that's where we set the parameter for the lockdown profile. There we go. Let's just create this user quickly. And just need to make sure that my TNS names are set up correctly. Ahmed, can I ask you to maybe just have a look at the chat and let me know what some of the questions are?
Yeah, sure. There is one question. You mentioned that there's a restriction in terms of number of PDBs that one can create without a multi-tenant license.
Yeah, I did.
there is a functionality in place at the CBD level to prevent creating more than 3 PDBs.
There absolutely is. So let me just finish up here. So you can see I've connected as a local user to the PDB. I cannot create a database link. I cannot do an alter session to change my NLS state format. And let's just do the last one to create this table. Okay, feature not enabled, right? So that's what lockdown profiles are all about. And you can extend that quite significantly. Again, there is a blog post that one of the product managers have put out. They actually have a zip file that you can download from there that gives you a low, medium, and high level of restrictions from security point of view that you can use as a template to move forward. Right, so let's just do that, and where's Teams?
Okay, so I think we're running out of time. We only have 5 minutes left.
Yeah, I'm going to get to that question now quickly. Okay, so these are just some of the things that I've spoken about. And for everything else, there's article base, right? He's got a huge amount of content on multi-tenant with sometimes information that's more direct and easier to read than the actual documentation. So please go and have a look at what he's got. Play, break, fix, and learn. Okay, that's the best way for you guys to actually get the hang of it. There is a workshop that you can go and have a look at on Oracle Live Labs. Please go and spin this up, whether or not it's in your own environment, in OCI, in AWS, in Azure. You can go and go through this. All of the instructions and steps are included. And this sort of circles back to that question. There is a max PDBs parameter that you will need to set accordingly to make sure that you don't exceed the 3 free PDB limit. Okay, so remember that there is a PDB seed that is always there and created. That doesn't count as one of the free PDBs, if you will. So you would have a look at what you would set the max PDBs parameter. More than likely, it'll be you would need to make sure that you set that to 4, and the limit is per container database, right? So let's say you had 9 non-CDBs on a machine. You could, in theory, create 3 container databases, each of those with 3 PDBs themselves. And you would not have to be concerned about having to shell out for the multi-tenant license. Okay, so the max limit on the PDBs is per container database.
Okay, we got our last question and then we need to cut off. This is from Zwandile to say, I have a 47 terabyte database. What is the best method to move it to a container?
So it will probably be the option where it's an in-place move. So you can actually migrate a non-CDB into a PDB, and that effectively reuses the data files that exist in place. I can appreciate that you wouldn't want to sort of do a copy of 47 terabytes. You probably won't, it'll be a challenge for you to go and get that from the storage team, but that would probably be your best option to do an in-place conversion from non-CDB to PDB. And again, there are links around that. I'll include that in the email that I sent to you, Ahmed, and you can just redistribute to everybody that that's on the mailing list.
Okay. Thank you all. We reached the end of our session. Thank you, Ian. It was extremely useful and we learned a lot. We have reached time up. I will share the recording and the presentation with you. Thank you all and bye-bye.
Thanks, folks.